I'm out here on the Habitat Oasis project today. It is, I guess it's June 13th. Hot, humid day out here. But I thought I would do a quick talk about kind of what size tractor do you need? I see a lot of people on the forums asking questions about, they give a quick description of their property, and then they ask, what size tractor do I need? And frequently the response is, buy as big a tractor as you can afford, or figure out what size tractor you need and then go one size larger. And what I'm going to tell you today is, I think both of those are bad advice, especially the way I see that advice delivered. Typically, what I see when that advice is delivered is people that are trying to be helpful, but they don't understand your specific use case. So they are trying to size your tractor based on how many acres you've got. They have no idea whether it's wooded, what you plan on doing on that property, how much mowing you're doing, does it have hills? No idea what you're doing, but they're throwing out there, and basically their goal is to say, buy something bigger than you think you'll need so you'll never regret it. And what I'm going to do is talk about why getting a tractor that's too big could be a regret, and there are a lot of downsides to it. We've got here on the Habitat Oasis, we've got a 1025R, a 2032R, and a 4052R. So I think I'm kind of well suited to be able to give an evaluation of what it means to have tractors of different sizes and whether you can get a tractor that's too big. If you've watched our buyer's guide, one of the things I mention in every episode of the buyer's guide is understand your use case. And when you start thinking about buying a tractor, that is going to be the number one thing you have to figure out. What type of jobs do you plan on doing with your tractor? And that is going to help you decide what size tractor you need. So take a look at your property. Are you going to be doing a lot of brush hogging? Are you going to be doing a lot of tillage work? With a lot of guys buy these tractors so that they can do wildlife management, habitat management. They're putting in food plots. Are you putting in 12 acres of food plots, or are you putting in 2 acres? It makes a big difference in terms of what size equipment you need. So some areas that I'm going to focus on, and you're going to have to forgive me because I've got several areas, so I made some notes. First off, we're going to talk about just understanding your use case, get into a little more detail on that. We're also going to talk about the purchase, insurance, operating, and maintenance, and how much can you afford, and what is the opportunity expense of spending more than you need to. We're going to talk about transporting and storage, and we're also going to talk about attachments and how the size tractor you purchase impacts attachments that you're going to buy and what you're going to spend on attachments. So let's go back to that use case. I mentioned mowing, and here on the Habitat Oasis we've got 2 cabins. We have to be able to mow the yard at both of those cabins. And when I bought the 1025R, I own a cabin in West Virginia that had a couple acres that needed to be mowed with a lawn mowed. So I bought that 1025R with the primary use case for that being mowing. When Josh bought his property, he needed a mower, and he bought the 2032R. He's got more property to mow. He wanted to have a bigger tractor that was more versatile to do some things out here on the Habitat Oasis, but he also needed to be able to use it in the yard. Things we've run into when you start mowing: the bigger your tractor, the heavier it's going to be, the more likely you are to tear up your yard. So if you've got a large tractor, you go up to a 3 Series, and that's the largest one you can buy with a mid-mount mower, that's a heavy tractor that has the potential of really tearing up your yard. Josh's yard, most of it is on a hill. So if you get out there and it's wet at all, you're going to tear up that property. If you've got your the wheels filled, your tires filled, you're probably going to tear up your property. Trimming around trees is always interesting too. Josh had a Massey Ferguson that was a 25 horsepower. He could get around almost all of his trees. When he bought the bigger tractor, suddenly he was sitting up higher, and now he struggled to get close enough to the trees to trim because there were branches there, and he was hitting them. Either they were hitting him or they were hitting the ROPS. So you start needing more space. So when you start thinking about where you're using your tractor, how tight of spaces are you going to be working in? Are you going to be, do you have a small barn and you're going to be cleaning out horse stalls or something? You need to get in there with a loader. How big of a tractor can you operate inside that barn? Are you going to be using it in the woods? What do your trails look like? Think about how much space you need. A smaller tractor is going to fit into much smaller spaces. I see people that use their tractors as part of their profession, and they'll talk about the 1025R, and one of the great things about it, they can get it through a gate into people's backyards to do work. So think about that. What's your use case? How big is too big in terms of being able to operate in the areas that you want to operate? Next topic is purchase, insurance, operating expenses, maintenance, things along those lines. Purchase price. When you start thinking about buying a tractor and you go with the idea, how much can I afford to spend, and you max yourself out on buying more tractor than you need, that takes away from the money you have to do other things. Whether it's other things related to the tractor or other things related to your property, if you can get away with a $20,000 tractor or a $25,000 tractor and it's going to do the job for you, why spend $35,000? Why create a payment that's $100 a month more when you don't need it? So think about that purchase price, and does it really make sense to max that purchase out if you don't have the use case to support it? Insurance. When I purchased my tractor, the 4052R, I bought from an individual, so I had to go out and insure it right away. The way I insured it, I called my agent, I told him what the value was, and he wrote me a policy based on that value. So this tractor and the attachments are valued somewhere around $35,000. That same tractor valued at, not that same tractor, another tractor valued at $20,000 is going to be cheaper to insure. So your annual cost of insurance is going to be lower. Again, no sense in paying for way more horsepower and way more tractor than you need in driving up that insurance cost. Operating expenses fall into that same category. If a smaller tractor is going to be more fuel efficient. Maybe there's a use case where it's not, I don't know. Maybe it takes, if you factor in, I'm using 4-foot attachments versus 8-foot attachments, there's probably some fancy calculations you can do to say there's cases where it's cheaper to use a big tractor. Not going to argue those, but in general, a larger tractor with a larger engine is going to use more fuel. So your fuel expense on an annual basis is going to be higher. So consider that. Finally, you've got your maintenance expenses. Anytime you've got a bigger tractor, you're going to have more fluids. So that means you're going to have more oil when it comes time for an oil change, more hydraulic fluid when it's time to change those. If a tire needs to be replaced, tires are going to be more expensive. When you do basic maintenance, if you're greasing it, probably negligible amount of grease, but all of your connections are going to be larger, so you're going to require more grease. All of those maintenance costs are going to be more expensive. If you take it in for a tune-up, I guarantee they're going to charge you more to tune up the 4052R than they are the 1025R. So think about those ongoing expenses and measure those against the efficiencies you're gaining from a larger tractor. There's a lot of expenses there that you may not think of till you're already out the door. So that hits our purchase, insurance, operating, and maintenance expenses. Next up on my list is attachments. So I bought my 1025R. I spent around $20,000. I got the tractor, I got the mid-mount mower, I got the front end loader, I got a tiller, I got a small trailer for it. A year later, I spent another $2,000, a little over $2,000. I bought a brush hog. I got a back blade on it. I spent about less than $25,000, and I had all the attachments that I needed for that tractor at the time. The reason I upgraded was I went from taking care of 2 acres to taking care of, well, at this point we're over 170 acres. So my use case changed dramatically. But what that means is when you buy a bigger tractor, every attachment you purchase is going to cost you more. The question everybody was always asking is, what size tiller, what size brush hog can I run behind my tractor? And everybody wants to max out what they're using, that you want to be as efficient as possible. Typically, you don't want something that's smaller than the width of your wheels. So for a 1025R, you want to have a 4-foot attachment. For this 4052R, I've got a 6-foot brush hog. So when you go to buy your attachments, everything's going to be more expensive. Could you put a 4-foot attachment on here? Absolutely. Would you want to operate it with a 4-foot? Probably not. So now think about, you're going to buy 3, 4, 5 attachments to go on the back of this. When you go from a 4-foot tiller or a 4-foot brush hog to a 5-foot to a 6-foot, every foot you add on is adding expense to that purchase. So think about that. 5 attachments, each one of them more expensive than you could have gotten on a smaller tractor. You're going to spend thousands of dollars more on those attachments. With this particular tractor, the only attachment I have for it, for the rear, is the brush hog. My primary use case is brush hogging and clearing our property of invasive species. I've tried to get away from tilling and doing a lot of no-till work. I do use a sprayer, but I use the sprayer on my side-by-side. So the primary use for this tractor is brush hogging and the front end loader. So I've got the loader, I've got a set of forks, and that's the attachments that I've got for this. Now what would be really nice to have out here is a batwing brush hog, something that folds out. But when you look at those, they're not cheap, and that's why I haven't invested in one yet. The 6-foot is way better than where I was with the 1025R and the 4-foot, and it gives me the power I need, but I've not yet been willing to bite off on that more expensive attachment. From a sprayer, we're spraying about, I don't know, 10 feet at a time. I'd love to have a sprayer that sprays 18 to 20 feet at a time. I'm currently shopping for one, but they're expensive. You're talking about a sprayer that's over $2,000. So think about the attachments you're going to use and how much extra you will pay for attachments on a big tractor versus a smaller tractor. Last thing I'm going to hit on is transportation and storage. One of the key things that I need, and it's why I still have the 1025R. I don't use it very often, but we're in Southeast Ohio on the Habitat Oasis. My other cabin, or my cabin, is in West Virginia. I need to be able to take the 1025R back and forth between the two places. The 1025R fits on my utility trailer, pretty much maxes out that 12-foot utility trailer. There's no way I could transport this. Neither Josh or I has a trailer big enough to handle the 2032R or the 4052R. So think about what your needs are. Are you going to need to transport that? And it's not just about the trailer. Do you have a tow vehicle that's capable of handling it? Is your tow vehicle equipped with electric brakes? So if you go up in trailer size and you start hauling bigger equipment, you're going to need electric brakes on your tow vehicle. So you start adding expense. You start off, hey, I'm really glad I bought this 3 Series tractor, and then you find out I need a bigger trailer. Bigger trailer requires electric brakes, and all my expenses have gone up when maybe I could have done well with a 1025R or a 2032R. So think about that transport. Think about where you're going to store the tractor. I bought the 1025R, and I don't even remember what the assumption was of where I would store it. I had a small shed, and I think I assumed I could store it in there. Well, it was a, what was it, 8 by 12? I think an 8 by 12 shed. That tractor barely fit in, and I took the ROPS down each time to make it fit. That worked for me. It was functional, but I hadn't really thought it through. Later, I built a shed, and the mistake I made when I built my shed, I should have had the doors about 2 inches taller, and I would have never had to take the ROPS down in and out of that shed. As it is, every time I go in and out, the ROPS have to be down, so I got to remember that. When I was shopping for the 4052R, I was given serious consideration to purchasing one with a cab. And my plan, I'd asked Josh, if I buy a tractor, can I store it in the barn? He's like, absolutely, there's room in the barn. Well, I bought this. I changed my mind on the cab, and it's a good thing I did, because the cab would not have fit into the barn. The ROPS on this has to come down each time I go in and out of the barn. So not a big deal. It just takes a minute for me to do it. But those are things to think about. From a storage standpoint, are you going to create an additional expense for yourself because you bought a tractor that now doesn't fit into a standard garage? You bought one that doesn't fit into your shed? You're taking up more room in your shed because you've got a bigger tractor, it's longer, it's wider, and you've got, who knows what else is in there, your side-by-side, your snowmobile, whatever other things you store in there. Now you're eating up more space in your garage, and now you're trying to figure out, where am I going to move this and store it? So now you got the expense of storage. So those are a number of things. I'm just going to check real quick, make sure I haven't missed anything that I wanted to be sure I hit on. I think I've hit everything. But yeah, I think that the advice people give of, buy as big as you can, it's good-natured advice, but it's around the idea of you don't want to regret a tractor that's not big enough. And most people will say, I'd rather have a tractor that's too big than too small. And I can't necessarily argue with that from a use standpoint, but if it's too big and you need to transport it, it's too expensive to operate, it's too expensive to buy attachments for, you're going to have regrets on that side as well. So when you look at your use case, think about your property, think about what you're going to do, and really consider what those projects look like. Josh and I have found that the 2032R does pretty much everything we need on this farm. The things we use the 4052R for, we used it to pull a no-till drill because we needed a heavy tractor so it didn't get pushed around by the drill. And we also use the forks on it to move logs to the sawmill that are too big for the 2032R. But that 2032R, it will do 90%, I would say, of what needs done on the 170 acres. So when somebody tells you you've got 10 acres and you need a 3 series, rethink that advice. Think about your use case. I think I've harped on it long enough. Anyway, thanks for joining. It's great to be outside. You know, our theme is outdoors is always in season. I'm thrilled to be out here enjoying the outdoors. So get out, enjoy the outdoors. If this was beneficial to you, hit like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Thanks, and have a great day.